According to the cloud. Thank you, Robot Lady. All right, so share screen, portion of the screen. Welcome to Tools for Thought Rocks. If you're not here for Tools for Thought Rocks, if you're here for something else, feel free to show yourself to the door. That is why we are here. Tools for Thought Rocks is a group that meets together to talk about these things that have various names: digital gardens, second brains, tools for thought, that kind of thing. It's primarily folks who are working as makers of these tools or creators of these tools, but it's also heavy users of these tools who are trying to figure out how to use tools like this to think better, to work better with other people, and to basically become a part of their workflow in their life. So we've been doing this for like a year and a half now. There's like a whole bunch of past meeting recordings on YouTube if you wanted to dig in there and check that out. There's also a Mastodon server, toolsforthought.rocks. So if you're looking for a place to migrate from the sinking ship that is Twitter, then feel free to join us on Mastodon, on Tools for Thought there, and try out your hand at ActivityPub. The main way that we coordinate is through Luma, and I believe all of you got here through that. If you didn't, that's fine. Welcome, you're welcome, but you should go sign up for the group on Luma. That's where you'll get notifications about future events, and as well as like recaps of past events, notifications when the YouTube video is available, as well as some of the other stuff that happens around the community. I just mentioned the YouTube is up, so that a lot of our content's up on YouTube, so feel free to go check that out if you like. We also have an open collective, so if you're enjoying this and would like to throw some money into making fun stuff happen, you can go to opencollective.com/toolsforthought and fund this delightful event. And we do occasionally use that funding for things like resources like hosting the Mastodon server, which Fission is currently providing for, and some of the other resources are kind of donated by the community. But if we have some funding, we could do some fun stuff, like maybe eventually another in-person meeting or some kind of conference or something. But that's there for you. Main thing we do is get together monthly to talk about Tools for Thought Rocks, or Tools for Thought and related topics. If you have any people that you would like to hear from or topics that you'd like to talk about, feel free to reach out to me or Michael Gartner, who's on the call right now, is also helping to organize. Hey, Michael. And Boris is usually around as well. So any of us to like kind of propose a topic, we love it when people reach out and say, there's something I'm interested in, I want to talk about it. This is a like friendly group to have those conversations in. And then finally, as we're going through, Jakob, I'm going to hand over to Jakob in just a second for like our main, or like the first of the two kind of sections of the meeting. But the kind of the etiquette or the protocol here is, if you have a question, I leave it so that you can unmute yourself. I'm going to let Jakob say whether he wants to like give a 5 or 10 minute talk uninterrupted, or if he's like, interrupt me as I go. Different speakers have different preferences that way. But when you have something to say, you're welcome to unmute and try that. If you're not comfortable unmuting, feel free to type in the chat. I'll be watching that chat and I can then say your question out loud for you as we go along. So, and feel free to use the raise hand in Zoom thing, and I can call on you during that piece. All right, sweet. Well, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Jakob from LogSeq. So Jakob is a product designer at LogSeq, and he has been working on building a canvas, I believe, based on TLDraw, if I'm correct. That might be why Steve Ruiz has snuck into the back of the room. The TLDraw canvas into LogSeq. For those of you who are not familiar with LogSeq, Jakob might be giving a demo of that as well, but I'll just give a like 2-second version. This is another text-based, graph-based tool for taking notes, kind of in the tradition of sort of Rome, Obsidian, Notion. It has a lot of things that it also focuses heavily on open source, and it's more of an outliner for those folks who have been there. Ramses is also in the chat, who's a community organizer at LogSeq. So if you have questions about LogSeq that are not related to this call, Ramses might be able to answer those for you in the chat. All right, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Jakob and stop my share.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. And yeah, I would prefer talking through it first and then having a Q&A afterwards, if that's fine with you. Cool. Let's jump right into LogSeq. Can you see my screen? Yeah. All right. Well, I'm excited to give you a little show and tell of LogSeq whiteboards. Thank you for the intro, Jess. And yeah, as you, let's go first with like what I'm going to talk about quickly. Where does the LogSeq whiteboard feature come from? What do we set out to build? What do users really like about this feature, and how do they use it? And then what's to come in the future? And as Jess said already, LogSeq is traditionally known as an outliner-based tool for thought, with a like local first approach based on markdown files. And so it kind of begs the question: how come we're suddenly in the spatial canvas arena? We still love the outliner. We still think it's great for personal knowledge management. It's especially useful with journals in the daily usage, for example, for meetings, for work logs, for collecting ideas and stuff like that. But we think that in a lot of knowledge work situations, there's also something missing. And I think Maggie Appleton was one of the first. She's also pretty famous in the scene, I would say, and she was one of the first to point the issue out that I want to talk about. She says that one process that she struggles doing in these outliner-based softwares, and she's been big on Rome research, for example, back then at least, is structuring talks and essays, for example. For her, she's a very like visual thinker, I would say. She requires a spatial canvas that handles text well, kind of like post-it notes on the wall situation. And yeah, here as well, she says that, yeah, a lot of these typical note-taking knowledge management apps are missing that ability to break out of linearity, basically, the linearity of text, and do so ideally by enabling spatial arrangement, drawing, visual input, stuff like that. So based on this, and also our conversations with our users and our own vision, we had this like very strong hunch that there's a need to signify connections of information. And I'm talking about information that's already in your knowledge base, but also emergent thoughts in the moment, and signify those connections through lines or proximity, through grouping on a canvas. Yeah, that just allows to place these information elements together with shapes, with drawings, and stuff like that. And so basically, there's benefits of the indentation paradigm of the outliner. It's great for structuring input in a hierarchical and linear way. It helps a lot of users to clarify their thoughts. It's great for constructing and organizing ideas in a sequence, and that helps especially writers, but also all types of knowledge workers, to have a foundation for written artifacts they need to produce, like emails, blog posts, thesis, lecture, grant proposal, whatever. And but on the other hand, there's also the benefits of the infinite canvas, things like proximity of elements, grouping, visual connecting with lines, size, and color. They help the brain to understand structure. And so, like paper, these canvas tools help the user to break out of the linearity, arrange things in a very free way, kind of build like a world for their thoughts, be it a mind map, a mood board, arranging post-it notes on the wall like Maggie does, or would like to do. And so that's kind of like the memory palace idea, that basically, yeah, arranging things in space strengthens their connection in your brain. And so what did we set out to build? We're gonna launch next week, actually, the MVP version of Whiteboard. That means our Whiteboard feature enters the beta stage. Oops, that doesn't look that great. So basically, where we set out to extend the LogSeq outliner mode with a canvas that allows users to visually group and link different elements from their knowledge base, as well as external media types and shapes and stuff like that, to compose, to remix, to annotate and relate contents. We also were very focused on frictionless entering being part of this product experience, or core of this product experience, and also fast connection making. not so much focusing on drawing and detail customization in the beginning, although that's also things we aspire to do. Also very important for us was that, yeah, like block and page references basically work on the canvas, so you can effortlessly use them a lot how you would use them in the rest of LogSeq, and also kind of have a visual way of block referencing, basically live copies of elements. And yeah, each element obviously should also follow this paradigm of being able to be opened as a page or in the right sidebar. That's also something we find pretty important. Users should be able to change the background color of cards and all shapes in the canvas. Like, for example, so, yeah, for more complex topics, we also think nested whiteboards are pretty useful, which I'll show an example of later. All whiteboard elements similar to yeah, all the blocks basically should be findable in the search interface. So yeah, basically these were the main things we were setting out to do. And another thing I will show later as well is like every block or element on the canvas can be linked to any other block or page in your graph. And so that brings me to what do users really like about the whiteboard feature as it is in this current stage. Most people that I speak to really appreciate this ability to have basically a freeform canvas that allows them to link elements, like all elements from the graph in a way, and just drop them on the canvas basically. And it has a lot of purposes for different types of users. Diagramming is an obvious one. Mood boards is also something I've seen a few times already. Visual wiki is something that yeah, we hope we can see more in the future as well with the linking feature. And studying, making connections between topics, sense making, that's something I've definitely seen a lot. Also, people appreciate the ability to, yeah, embed YouTube videos and websites and stuff like that. So how do people actually use whiteboards? Well, the mind mapping use case is, I guess, like a very obvious one. Here's like a user showing me how he actually created a whiteboard about whiteboards and really kind of showing off all the features like embedding blocks and pages. I'm just going to close this so it's not distracting. Yeah, embedding blocks and pages. Yeah, linking things with arrows and yeah, then just the ability to arrange blocks leads to sense making, as I said before. This user also showed me that he actually annotates screenshots sometimes. So this is something that's interesting for people in the design and front end world. Like you throw in screenshots of something you need to work on at the moment, and you might want to like highlight something that needs to be improved. For example, I also talked to one person that's working in filmmaking, where you would maybe throw in a scene or like a still of a scene and yeah, annotate things like that. Making flowcharts is quite an obvious one as well, like understanding causes of situations or yeah, complex problems. Nesting whiteboards. This is, I think, not a very exciting whiteboard, just a random scribble, but yeah, just to show you, like you can nest whiteboards into each other, which can be useful for more complex topics. And yeah, I think the biggest one at the moment that I see often, and that I think also just shows the power of whiteboards embedded into all the other LogSeq features, is studying actually. So using it together, like in conjunction with the PDF reader and the annotation feature and the outliner. So here's like a screenshot of a person, for example, reading a scientific paper or whatever, having the right sidebar open and also having the canvas open and kind of, yeah, doing all these things at the same time. One person that I especially was amazed by when they showed me their studying process was Brian Santa, who's also pretty popular in our community with all the plugins and stuff he's providing. He's actually taking Stanford computer science course at the moment, and what he uses whiteboards for is basically to they provide slides, lecture handout notes, and also book recommendations and stuff like that. And he collects all that in the outliner view, and then makes subpages for these different resources. Okay, for example, slides and stuff like that. And then starts highlighting in the PDF reader. And the whiteboard basically for him is the way to bring all these things together and to find the connections between them. And I just think that's a very powerful workflow. And what I also loved hearing from him was that he actually says that the spatial organizing of the elements on the canvas is actually for him basically the learning process. So this again brings me back to the memory palace thing I mentioned earlier. This is sense making, basically, the arranging. Some other things that people use are, for example, the YouTube embeds, and another feature that still we're trying to improve, but there's an early version of it. Basically, is like embedding websites like that. Lastly, a feature we added recently and that we think can be very powerful is a linking feature. So basically, any whiteboard element can be selected and linked to any block or page you have in your graph already. So, for example, here I just dropped in an image of a real world whiteboard, and I can just start typing now. For example, like so, and you see now this element has like a link at the bottom, and which I can click, and it brings me to that page or that block or whatever I choose to link it to. And on the page that you're linking it to, of course, you also then see the backlink to this element. Potential use case for that. I think there's many use cases for that. Internally, we've been using it a bit already, but one thing that, for example, also a user recommended or suggested is things like software architecture diagrams, where you're trying to map out this complex system. Basically, you throw in all these icons, and it would be great if it kind of would work like a visual wiki where you could click on these elements and link to, for example, documentation or stuff like that. So that's possible now. And what's to come? Well, first of all, it's still an MVP that we're going to launch next week. There's still many things to improve. We want to especially remove all the UI quirks over time, make it more frictionless, more effortless, of course. We also want to strongly improve the mobile whiteboard experience. So there's already been put some effort into improving the experience on iPad, but there's still a long way to go to make the stylus input nicer, so handwriting on touch devices and also in general, like the touch experience with whiteboards can still be improved, although it's already working. Like you can already try it out once it's launching next week. And we're also very excited about, so now what we're demoing here is like that it's possible to get all the outliner elements into the canvas very easily, and you can drag and drop things into it, copy paste. But what we still can improve strongly is displaying whiteboard elements in the outliner. So this is something we want to improve in the future. So basically having a preview of a whiteboard easily embedded in the outline, having whiteboard elements easily previewed in the outline, this kind of stuff. And then we're also working on publishing, on the publishing feature, and of course, publishing whiteboards is also something that's pretty exciting. For example, Brian, who I showed earlier, would love to probably publish his lecture whiteboards, and then lastly, one thing that we're also very excited about is we see whiteboards as like a part in the creation of artifacts, and I think that's also kind of like what Maggie was hinting at in the tweet that I started with. Taking myself, for example, as an example, like I'm trying to write a blog post, and I might collect in an outline first, like all the ideas I already have in my graph in different places, and I create a first outline of like what I think I could write about, and then I throw that into a whiteboard and try to like see new connections, maybe rearrange things, or you start writing in the whiteboard, for example. And what we would love to be able to do eventually is also let users move from the whiteboard back to the outline or to a document mode. So yeah, you can basically have the full artifact creation pipeline in LogSeq. And lastly, I want to end with just like regarding the future of these canvas-based tools. I think there's been many great tools in this space already, also in this series that we've seen quite a few interesting ones. And I think in general, my interpretation of the market or of the development is that we see like a convergence of interface paradigms. So there's been many great spatial or like canvas-based tools. There's been many personal knowledge management, note-taking, outliner tools. And 2023 might be the year where the affordance of canvases becomes more of a standard in all types of note-taking tools. And I think some spatial tools are experimenting with building note views or outliner views, for example. And on the other hand, we see, for example, tools like Obsidian, but also ourselves working on canvas views. And so I'm very excited for what the future holds there. That's it. Thank you.
Great job, Jakob. That was awesome. Lots to dig into there. Feel free to raise your hand, folks, and I'll call on you as you go, or just unmute if you have a question. No one else is talking. I have a few thoughts, but I haven't seen any questions in the chat, so I'm not. If I missed something, feel free to call it out to me.
Well, you had a question, Jess, about how can you, for example, hide the detail view of a block? Maybe Jakob, you can show collapsing and expanding a block on the canvas, because basically how it works is when you drag a block onto the canvas, you can show either its entire branch or just the parent block, so the block you actually dragged onto the canvas. So,
and you can basically still use the outliner on the canvas as well, or you can choose to work in a more simple mode by collapsing it. And we think both modes are useful.
Okay, so
for example,
collapse says show the top block, and then expand says show the whole thing.
Exactly.
What if I want to grab something from in the middle of an article, like grab out an excerpt?
What exactly do you mean?
Sorry, grab something from the middle of a note, or is it just kind of based on?
Oh, I can always grab something out of the outline.
Got it.
And see
its
above
context where it came from. Okay.
Exactly.
But
exactly.
Got it. The smallest unit in LogSeq is the block. So if you're referring to maybe a few words in a sentence of a block, that's currently, well, there's some workarounds, some manual workarounds, but ultimately the block is the smallest unit. So
yeah, that's the huge advantage of being block-based / outliner-based. I'll be really curious to see how Obsidian handles this same problem, because it is not block-based, or at least not strictly the way that LogSeq is. And I guess we'll get to see that soon, since they're working on a canvas feature as well that's in beta. Sorry, I think Michael had a question. Alan, you had a question before, but you just put your hand down. So I'm going to go with Michael.
Was interested in going from query to whiteboard, the canvas, if you were to say like querying all notes that are linked to note A or all notes linking from note A, and then importing note A into the canvas and all the notes that link to note A, and then adding those arrow relations as well. Have you thought about like kind of some advanced stuff like that? Or is that a direction you're planning on going or thinking about going, or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely curious about this direction, and especially the folks that are in the discourse graph field have talked with us about these ideas as well. Yeah, they would love to have like a visual representation of the discourse graph, but also be able to query the relations. Currently, the arrow doesn't create like a property or like some connection beside the visual one. But yeah, we're definitely curious about that.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Alan, I think you had a question. Your hand's back up.
Yeah, this is less about the actual interface. I love what I'm seeing. And it's a little more about the nature of the collaboration, actually. I know we've probably all seen Obsidian and TLDraw. The developer there working with Obsidian or building out his tool as a plugin to Obsidian. This seems more like a native faculty facility. I just like to know more about it. Is it a plugin or is it like a native? And if so, if it is a deeper integration, how has that been like working together? Is that a kind of pattern that you see more possibilities with in tools that aren't dominating the space? And by dominating, I mean just like Apple Notes, that kind of level where, you know, if you're trying to get to a general audience. All right, that's it.
Yeah, interesting question. I have to say, I'm not the technical person in the team. I'm a product designer, so can't fully go into the detail there. But I mean, the basically it is you can turn it off and on as a feature. So that's kind of plugin like, but it is a much deeper integration than typical plugins, and also much more effort, of course. And it was very interesting how this came about as well. It's been built, technically built in the beginning by Peng, who couldn't come today, but he's not part of the LogSeq team at the moment. He's a collaborator who's been building plugins before as well. But we just suddenly developed this like very close collaboration as well, and now also team members are working on it, including me and our front-end engineer. And yeah, we definitely see this as something more than a plugin, but yeah, can still toggle it as a feature, basically.
That's great. Thank you.
I think one of the things that, and I mentioned this at the beginning, but I'll highlight it one more time to mention that this is actually built on top of TLDraw. So TLDraw is a sort of general purpose toolkit for building your own spatial canvas. TLDraw has its own website too, where you can go and play around with their spatial canvas set, but it's designed to be able to be embedded in other tools and then customized, like heavily customized, which I'm just looking at the interface. Jakob, y'all have obviously done pretty heavy customization of that. And yeah, at some point, obviously the person to speak to that process would be more Ping, but relevant to mention that this is was not started from scratch inside LogSeq, that they were kind of starting from a component that allowed them to take advantage of some of the common interface paradigms that Jakob talked about. Some things were already done for them, so to speak. Other questions for Jakob and or Ramsey?
I mean, I could go on.
Well, feel free. If you have another question, go for it.
All right. So is anyone familiar with Canopio?
Yeah,
right. That was on a previous session.
Two months ago. Yeah.
There are some interesting takes there that I think are really useful models. And I'd be curious as to, and I can explain a couple of them, but have you looked at other experiments that are going on? Are there other kinds of micro interfaces or interactions that you're looking at accomplishing? One in particular with Canopio, you could sort of lasso around some objects and perform attributes or mutations on them or move them around. There's in Scapel, there's a kind of a way where you can just hit Command Enter and create a new block. Curious if you're looking around to those kinds of additions.
Yeah, for sure. I think what's very interesting. I mean, Canopio really innovated also with the draw to select, right? Like I think that's very interesting there. You can, I guess that's what you meant with the lassoing as well. But yeah, we're definitely very fascinated by other interface approaches, and also would love to add some ideas that we find particularly interesting in the future. In the beginning, we wanted to focus on, for the MVP, like on a quick enter mode. So yeah, making it very frictionless to like create a node or search your graph. So I think that's the main thing we focused on.
Jakob, how does that work? Because we can't see exactly what you're doing. Are you double clicking there?
I'm double clicking exactly.
Okay.
And I guess that's
the three options. Sorry,
huh?
I wanted to slow that interaction down just so I could understand. The three options there, I can create something new,
yeah,
like a new block. If I'm creating a new block, I assume that is also creating a new file, right? Because LogSeq is file based at the end of the day too, right?
It's saved somewhere where all the outliner or the search or all interface elements can resurface it. So you can reference this block that I create now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can reference it in the outliner if I would want to.
And it's like, but you can almost think of it like a new note. Like if I double click on that thing to open it in the right panel, then I've created a new sort of top level thing.
Yeah. So for example, here, like I'm just referencing this element now. And yeah,
what were the other two options? So there was create a new one.
You can also search, and you can filter like search only by pages or search only by blocks.
Very cool.
You can also create a new page or a new whiteboard once you start typing.
Very nice. Yeah. So you can basically double click and start typing right away. And if the thing exists, you can find it right away because it's going to be search.
Exactly.
And if you're trying to create a new thing, you can just start typing all the stuff you want to type and hit enter, and you'll have a new block.
Exactly. And we're definitely still trying to improve that experience as well. I think right now it's very similar to the Command K interface where it also works with like searching and creating. These two functionalities are very connected. Mm-hmm. But yeah, to get to your question, Alan, also one thing that I'm very excited about is like visual, like drag and drop and like copy pasting, this kind of stuff, like improving a bit the interface in that direction. Yeah, so just showing you like what you have maybe in your clipboard, making it easy to paste. I think a lot of like tools like Figma and stuff like that also, for example, give you, I think TLDraw might also do that at this point. I don't know, Steve, if that's true, but right now you don't see like a preview of the rectangle that you're going to create, for example. So yeah, just like little UI touches like that are definitely on our roadmap as well. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Gary had a question and I wanted to jump in there for. He said, do you have or consider an export format for the canvas so that people can import it at least as an outline into theirs? So basically, how do you think about interop of like, you've been making this whiteboard, and I'd like to take yours and start from there, or you'd like to hand off, how do we collaborate on this whiteboard? And Gary, if you have things to add to that, feel free.
Yeah, okay, I'm listening for the answer.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. At the moment, yeah, as I said, there's not an easy way to move from the whiteboard back to the outline. we eventually want to basically treat the whiteboard as a view that can also be transformed into the outline. But it will take a bit more time to reach that. And yeah, I agree that interoperability is very important. The struggle is kind of at the moment there's like not like a clear shared file format that's best for canvases. So yeah, that's definitely something at the moment. It's a Ramses.
What about the because basically every whiteboard is an EDN file, right? So I think that the question also from Jess was, can you collaborate? So can you basically send a whiteboard as is to another LogSeq user?
Yeah.
So for example, would you be able to just send the EDN file or share the EDN file, and then the other person has the exact same whiteboard?
Yeah, you can for sure do that. What I'm not so sure about though is how that might break some references. If the person references things that they have only in their graph, it might be broken. But it could also be that the implementation still saves that in the EDN file. I haven't tried that actually, I have to admit. Yeah.
Interesting. Are you guys planning to leverage TLDraw's like real-time collaborative functionality when you get to the new version as well? Steve cross fingers.
Nice. Well, yeah, I think there's still some time for us to have real-time collaboration for LogSeq itself. There's so many things we have to focus on at the same time. So realistically, I would say there's like still a bit of time till we touch that topic, and hence I would say with whiteboards, it's still to be found out.
Gotcha. So in many ways, you're really focusing on optimizing for the single player experience right now. Like make this as powerful, deeply integrating into my own graph and that kind of stuff.
In this very moment for the MVP, that's the goal. Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense because if I'm joining your whiteboard, I do have my own graph. And what does that mean? Of like now when you're searching across my graph and your graph at the same time. So like that is like a whole nother level of collaboration that like TLDraw, while supporting broadcasting sort of the contents of a whiteboard simultaneously, it doesn't support broadcasting the contents of our graphs. So that like you would need like an additional facility for that. And it's not even clear what that would like look like. You end up with like the Notion problem of like the feeling that when we're all collaborating in Notion, this isn't my stuff, it's our stuff, right? And so it becomes like the team's resources as opposed to my resources. So how do you bring your personal graph into a space is I feel like an unsolved interface problem. For sure.
Yeah, and I think we're very excited to dive into that. But yeah, as I said, just so many things we're working on at the same time that it still needs some time to figure that out.
Yeah, that was a great question from Steve actually, which is somewhat related. Any plans for team graphs? Like, so I assume that's setting aside the whiteboard, but like actually how can we have a graph shared amongst a small group of people? And by graph, I assume you mean like pages and blocks.
Yeah, I mean, there's ways of doing that already. Mainly through GitHub, and that's what we do as a team actually. So we have a shared team graph. This presentation right now is in our shared team graph, which I also couldn't show everything, but yeah, that already works, but it doesn't work in real-time collaboration. But as I said, that's the goal with RTC. So but there's still so much for us to figure out. We're building for what exactly we should focus on, the interface details, as you mentioned, Jess. So yeah.
Got it. Last call for questions. Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, I just an experiment. I just posted a link. Hopefully it will work. I've been taking notes in something called Pyrgos. It's just a vanilla HTML editor. I just want to see whether it works. and you may find it interesting. Is the link there? But I can't see it. Can anybody see a link?
I see the link for sure.
I don't know. I don't see it in the chat. Is
No.
it working for anybody? I want to know how how the performance of it and everything. This is, by the way, also IPFS
It's
based
loading
stuff.
secret link.
Yes.
And I got in. Yeah, I see a couple of screenshots right now.
Oh, great! Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah.
I really want to draw your attention. This Spirgos is an amazing stuff. So
Cool.
it's not me. I just want to use it. I'm integrating into my work. But
Got it.
this is amazing. And just one other thing: if you ever need really work on the multiplayer and the exchange issue, I really would like to talk to you, because I've been following LogSeq from the moment go, and I'm ready to have that. So if you in the new year sometime we should connect, because I think this is really nice, and I think I really like LogSeq is local first. Okay, I mean that's very important. So
Yeah.
and of course, once you local first, you can go global. It's really, you can go from 0 to 1, and actually with Fission and other sort of IPFS magic, you can scale infinitely. So I think
Yeah.
really like to see that happening. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm
so
always down to chat, so you can reach out to me on
yeah, I
Twitter,
will.
or
I will.
if you're in Discord.
I'm just
Yeah, let's do
saying that it's amazing. And but the
Thank
one
you.
other thing, this draw thing, doesn't it have a sort of what kind of format is it? Some JSON or something, or what's that
It's-
EDM file?
Yeah, that's a closure file format, as far as I know.
Oh, it's basically a closure done. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Really enjoyed it. Thank you very much. I hope you find the notes useful. You can publish it on the videos if you want. Jess, you don't need to.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Thank you
before we
very
wrap
much.
up and kind of transition over, Steve, did you want to make any comments on, I mean, you've been working on TLDraw, they've been integrating TLDraw, and I know that there's an older version and you're working towards a newer version, and there's some stickiness around that. You want to comment any on your experience, or like how this has been for you, what you've learned through it?
So I was picking up my daughter for most of this conversation. So I've only been able to kind of like come in and out. Apologies if you can hear Peppa Pig in the background. First off, I think this is awesome. I mean, there's no greater joy for an open source author than to see the stuff that they made being used in such an ambitious way. I have a ton of questions about, like different design decisions that were made, user feedback, things that like kind of drove some of these changes, the places that this has been pushed and all that. But I guess it's like, I don't know. I'm just happy to see it. I do have a question, which is maybe this was covered already. On the toolbar, there's a pen, and then there's something right underneath the pen, kind of between the pen and the eraser. And my question is, what does that thing between the pen and the eraser do? On the right side of the screen, the third one down.
This one.
What is that?
It's actually the highlighter.
Right. Oh yeah, I built that. That was in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a highlighter. I think, but it's interesting that you're pointing that out. It's been some feedback as well, like we're still figuring out how this toolbar should look, and it might be that the line icons we use in the rest of the app might need some more detail on the toolbar actually. So have like, I don't know if you know how like in Apple, like Canvas tools, like there's like these nice pencils, for example, that you can see, or in Figma or FigJam. So yeah, we're still exploring there as well, like how to present the tools best. It seems like these two icons are very very close to each other and a bit confusing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the TLDraw always kind of like leans towards something more generic, but of course, you're building a product that doesn't have to be generic and anonymous. So I'm interested to see where it goes. No, this is a pleasure. I'm looking forward to watching the video to catch what I missed. Good job.
Thank you,
guys. Cool. Well, as we transition, this is actually a really interesting segue from what I want to spend the rest of our time talking about, which is we're 4 sessions in to hearing from people who are working on spatial canvases. So we've heard from, at this point, 7 different teams that are using spatial canvases in a variety of different ways. And what I'm really interested in is the spatial canvas is thinking about a spatial canvas as a medium, or a set of interface patterns and expectations that has certain workflows that work really well in it and other workflows that maybe not so well. I think everybody is at this point pretty familiar with the wide range of the ways that people use Excel spreadsheets or spreadsheets in general. There's, very structured ways to use it and sort of expectations, especially if you're in fields that lean on spreadsheets heavily. You might be taught in finance, for example, exactly how to build a spreadsheet for a specific kind of situation to model something in a company or that kind of stuff. But people do wild things with spreadsheets and use them for all kinds of things. Some of those things work really well. Other times they don't work so well. You kind of come up against the limits of the medium of the spreadsheet and you realize, oh, I need a database, or, oh, I need, some other medium to kind of capture things in there. And I'm kind of curious about the edges of the medium when it comes to spatial canvases. When are we actually like running up against this is sort of a fundamental limit to what you should try to do in a 2-dimensional spatial canvas? Or are we kind of coming up against something where we'll come up with a user interface paradigm or or some other technological breakthrough that'll kind of allow us to extend the medium to handle that workflow? So this is my very abstract, welcome to my brain, way of thinking about sort of spatial canvases. And then as all of us are developing spatial canvases, in my mind, there's sort of a simultaneous search going on of like, what is this medium good for? And all of us have different like parts of the data about that search in our brains. How do we bring that data together? So what I've been every month for the last few months that we've had these, I've been asking the same questions of all the creators. What have you found spatial canvases to be good for? What are they not good for? Like, what's hard to do? What's easy to do? And so I've captured that in a spatial canvas, TLDraw. And I want to talk about basically the takeaways from the last like 4 months so far of what I think is good in the medium and what I think is maybe needs some work, or like some of the challenges. And I want to spend about 10-15 minutes on this. And then I want to open it up and have a collaborative TLDraw set up so that you can kind of post your thoughts and that kind of stuff. There's a lot of folks in here who are working with spatial canvases or have been hanging out and thinking about that kind of stuff as well. So let me share my screen real quick. Basic. Here we are. All right. So I'll share a link to this TLDraw in just a second. But what I want to talk about is what I see of some main attributes of this spatial medium. So one of the ones that I think is really powerful about spatial canvases is that you have a flexible meaning inside of a spatial canvas. In other words, you can use a spatial canvas to represent all kinds of things. I thought it was interesting that Jakob actually mentioned this in his talk. People are using them for mind maps. People are using them for, there was another example specifically, I can't remember now what it was, but people are kind of using the malleability of the spatial canvas to represent a variety of different things. You can, do a timeline from left to right. You can do all this kind of stuff. Allows you to kind of create your own structure as you come into the space. The downside of this, I hadn't really internalized until I was talking to Rodrigo last week in New York, is that you not only can you create your own structure, you have to create your own structure. When you come into a space, you have to decide how you're going to use the space. which is actually a decision that I was faced with this morning when I was setting up this whiteboard. So I jumped into a TLDraw and it was completely blank. I was looking at something like this. And I was like, okay, I want to capture my thoughts about the different attributes of the medium. How am I going to put those on there? I kind of have like a positive and a negative for each one. So I kind of came up with this, like, all right, I'll put a thing here and it's like the attribute, and then I'll like point down at a green thing, and a green thing is a good thing and a red thing is a bad thing. But I had to make this up on the fly. There was no sort of notation for representing these thoughts. I was able, but also required to think of one as I was jumping into this. One of the reasons, the way Rodrigo talked about this, is in a lot of professional contexts, you have well-developed shared notation. And when you have a like well-understood notation, he mentioned specifically architects know blueprints very well. So they can unroll a blueprint, which is effectively like a 2D spatial canvas, if you think about it. And they can sort of very quickly look at that blueprint of a building and build a 3D model in their head that allows them to reason about that thing. And so that's the sort of opposite end of the spectrum when you have a 200 years of people across all countries, architects use kind of the same notation for representing blueprints, which is this well-embedded notation. So flexible meaning is both a strength and a weakness of our current set of spatial canvases. Another thing about spatial canvases that's kind of that has been surfacing is that they're really great for collaboration, but only certain types of collaboration. What makes them awesome for collaboration is sort of this real-time collaboration of, you have what I call like ambient awareness of what's happening. Like you can kind of, each of us can kind of carve out our little section in the canvas, which we're about to do in just a minute. And we can work within that section. And then I can kind of go over and look at what you're doing. You can come over and look at what I'm doing, but we have our own spaces. And so the fact that we're able to work in the same document or work in the same space is really excellent for sort of real-time collaboration. People use them for brainstorming and a lot of other things where you would use a physical space to allow the group to think together. But on the other side, asynchronous collaboration can be a little frustrating. And there's two specific ways that have come up when we've been talking with people over the last several months. One is that the previous thing we were talking about you can make your own meaning. When you come into someone else's space, it may make absolutely no sense to you. They put everything somewhere for a reason, but they're not there to explain it to you. If this is an async collaboration, they may say, hey, here's a link to this like real-time, to this spatial canvas. And you come in and you're like, what the heck? What is where? Why did they put this over here? What do these boxes mean? What do the arrows mean? And so that async collaboration can be a little challenging. The other piece around async is that when you come into a space after someone has been working in it and you've been working in it over time, really hard to see what changed. Of like, okay, you did some stuff in the spatial canvas between now and yesterday, and you're saying to your teammate, hey, go look at the new stuff. Where's the new stuff? What changed? And you have to like have been in there before. So I think that some of these things are solvable problems. I'm not sure that this is sort of the edges of spatial canvas such that we need to like use a different medium. But it certainly is a challenge for collaboration. Another thing that people have pointed out is that spatial canvases are really excellent for early phase or exploratory work because you can create your own meaning, because they have this flexibility to embed lots of different multimedia objects and stuff like that. You can explore very quickly. The downside of that is that you almost always need to move from inside that spatial canvas into what the Muse team calls a production process of like, okay, the things in the spatial canvas are part of a blog post or a talk that I'm going to give or a YouTube video that I'm going to create. And moving from a spatial canvas, getting that information out, that meaning that I made, into another tool right now is really challenging. We talked already about how just interop and having a common file format, like we don't even have a common file format yet for these things. So being able to sort of import that information. And this is one of the reasons I'm excited about the exploration that LogSeq and Obsidian are doing, because as Jakob mentioned at the end, their goal is to allow you to do the whole production process inside of LogSeq without leaving. Go from a canvas to a completed blog post.
No, señora.
There you go. I'm gonna hit mute there. So yeah, you can go from a canvas to a completed blog post all inside the same tool. I think that's actually going to turn out to be really hard. And because you're trying to capture, basically, this is where the highlighter tool came up at the end of the presentation. What does it mean in the document or outliner view that you highlighted something in the spatial canvas view? And this is something we're going to have to decide as you move back and forth between these two mediums of like, if you're using, you have an outliner representation of this medium and a spatial canvas representation of this medium, which things are important to, like, which things have meaning in both directions. So if I make a change in the spatial canvas, what should correspondingly change in the outline, if anything? And so right now they mentioned one of the other elements that has meaning in the spatial canvas and no current meaning, but could in the outliner, which is arrows relating to objects in the LogSeq outline. Currently doesn't mean anything in the outline view, but you could see how it probably should. All right, last two more of these, and then I'll open it up for conversation. Permanence. One of the things that I love about spatial canvases is that I can work in them and then I can come back to them. It's kind of like being able to like configure my office and then write on the whiteboard and like open a bunch of books in my physical space, leave the office, come back the next day, and they're all still there. The drawing's still on the whiteboard. The books are still open to the pages that I was open to. That feeling of permanence, like the things are where I intended to put them and I can come back to them, is very empowering. And it stands opposed to some other mediums that we also use, where kind of you start from a blank slate every day. And I've had the experience of actually working in the, yeah, Alan, I'll drop a link to this TLDraw. You guys can jump into the TLDraw if you'd like. Please don't move things around just yet, but feel free to explore if you want to go back to some of these other topics. And hopefully, Steve, TLDraw can support 20 simultaneous viewers. We'll find out.
Yes, we will.
Cool. So I've had this experience where I was working with a team for 6 months, and they had one spatial canvas that was their meeting room that they came into every day during stand-up. And they would share screen and embed it in an embedded view inside that. And what was cool is like the space like accrued stuff over time. So there was like a birthday week where a whole bunch of people had birthdays, and they like made a space off in the corner of that, and they like had little GIFs for like people who were having birthdays, and it kind of just stayed there, the way that sort of detritus accumulates in an office for a team of like, hey, what's that like pile of stuff from? Oh, there were birthdays like 2 months ago, we just haven't cleaned it up yet. That same stuff happens in a spatial canvas, and this gets to the downside. It does start to feel messy, and cleaning the thing up starts to feel like a task all of its own. And we've talked to several Canvas folks who have talked about that challenge of keeping it organized starts to feel like keeping your room clean, like a chore, as opposed to truly sense making. And I think there's some interesting research directions here around basically having more than one view or representation of a spatial canvas, some that could be auto-organized, force-directed graphs, different things like that, where I could basically have the computer try to organize my space, clean my room for me, without destroying my personal arrangement where I personally put things. And people are just starting to kind of play around with some of those ideas. And lastly, multimedia. One of the things that makes these things great is that you can put just about anything into them. I'm sure Steve has seen more random stuff dropped into spatial canvases using TLDraw than most of us have, because he's trying to build this toolkit that works in a lot of different cases, the general purpose case, as opposed to there's a very clear workflow here. That's awesome. And we don't have a lot of other spaces where we can relate different kinds of media, PDFs, text, images, all these kind of things, have them all in the same place working together. The downside of that is what I call the Swiss Army knife problem, or the generalist problem, of basically a spatial canvas ends up with a mostly poor tool for everything, every other media, of like, you end up with a text editor that's woefully underpowered inside the spatial canvas. You end up with images, but you can you do crops? Can you change what, like, you end up with an image editor that's underpowered. You end up with like all of these mediums that are embedded in here have tools that you just want a little bit more from, especially when you're familiar with power tools, single purpose versions of those tools, like a text editor or a graphics editor or that kind of stuff. I'm not sure what to say here in terms of like, if you made power tool versions of all the different inside the spatial canvas, you would end up with an extremely cluttered interface. It's been interesting. If you don't follow Steve on Twitter and kind of his development TLDraw over time, he's kind of been thinking out loud about this problem for 6 months or 6 or 12 months of like, what exact features do I need to add to these particular things that give them enough to be powerful without them feeling hindered by that tool. Yeah, and James says he's dealing with that as well. So anyway, those are kind of 5 characteristics that I've observed of the medium of spatial canvases, both the positive and the negative side of each one of these. And I think some of these could turn into research problems that we could go start trying to solve. And others of them might be just the edges of the medium of like, when you choose this kind of medium, this is the downside that you take on. In the same way that if you chose a spreadsheet, there are certain things you're not going to be able to do inside that spreadsheet that you could do with a different representation. All right. I just spoke for a long time without pausing. I'm going to pause for a second. Anybody questions or comments on this? And then I'll sort of welcome you into the rest of the TLDraw space.
I think this is a very good summary of the sort of the challenges related to open, like spatial UIs and infinite canvases in general. It's also fun to see how many of these are so fundamental, like which makes me excited just knowing that it's so early, you know, and that there are such fundamental questions to be worked out. Yeah, that's sort of my comment to the moment.
Yeah, I agree. I'm hopeful that I'm hopeful that as we learn about these things, we can kind of share the learnings. I think that's one of the things, like personally, that I'm passionate about, and one of the reasons that I run this talk, these talks, is so that folks can come in and say, here's what I'm learning, share it with other people who are like running up against the same thing. Alan, you had your hand up. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I thought the last point about the spreadsheets is excellent, and perhaps an avenue forward to do more research, right? Because the example earlier of the sort of a sandbox, the long-term board where everybody joins in and just adds things, right? You can almost put that on a 2x2 quadrant, right? That is a long-term collaborative space. On the other side, you have almost an entirely different set of features when it's I open up my notes for the day and I start writing, and now I want to make a quick diagram, right? Those are arguably 2 different species, and it'd be good to maybe figure out the species to get a better sense of which features fit them.
I love that. Yeah, that definition of like a species of because even a spreadsheet is basically there are different I mentioned that there are different fields in which spreadsheets have sort of like understood notation of like, this is the way you will use the spreadsheet, and you will get your hand slapped if you do certain things the wrong way in the spreadsheet or change things, that kind of stuff. So there's sort of developed species out of spreadsheets as well. But then you also have these like nerfed versions of spreadsheets that get included in other mediums. So like Notions, tables are this really weird, not quite powerful spreadsheet thing.
Right.
And so that you can like even think about like shrinking down the capabilities of the medium and saying, well, this one just does these 3 things. I'm very curious to play with freeform, because I will bet a lot of money that they don't have all the features in freeform.
Right.
Because Apple is known for saying, these are the only things you actually need. See Apple Notes. Right. And so it'll be interesting to see what choices they made of like, these are the things you actually need in a spatial canvas. These are the things you don't. Yeah, it's interesting to, I think maybe at some point we could make like a categorization of like,
Absolutely.
here are the different ways that spatial canvases are used. And generally when they're used in this way, these are the most important features. The other ones don't matter. But like Steve said, we're really early.
That I've actually done that for more general tools for thought, and it does get pretty complicated, but it's nice to say like, oh yeah, this is better for this thing, and this one tries to be everything, right? And the spreadsheet inside of the embed is a whole nother kind of species. Anyway,
my hope here, and I guess one of the reasons why TLDraw is, I mean, it's TLDraw, it's an app, we're using it, right? But the hope is that there are a lot of cousins, close cousins potentially, where if it is a domain that really needs super high, like we're doing a lot of work with PDFs, we need to have a full PDF editor in the app. Like, not everyone needs that, but some people do. And the idea of having being able to build that into TLDraw and have it just be like, that's the part that you build rather than starting over from scratch and building the whole thing from the bottom ground up. I think we're going to see just more like, yeah, like variants on the theme. It's like, you're never going to get it right for all the users, but you can maybe create more apps for different users and different verticals. I'll happy to give you the canvas to do it with. But yeah, I mean, that's worked for other domains. I think it'll work here as well.
Yeah, I think, Steve, one of the powerful things about TLDraw is that it should be an accelerant for exploration. TLDraw itself, right? Like I can grab, there's a lot of really finicky, annoying stuff about implementing a canvas in the browser. And that if everyone is sort of re-encountering those problems, it seems like a waste of time. And so, yeah, hopefully people can kind of like take TLDraw and take it in a lot of different directions. TLDraw may not actually be the right foundation for certain kinds of like narrow problems. But it seems like a place where people could pick it up and start playing very quickly and discover whether this is a thing that they can actually, build out their idea on. Yeah. Guri, sorry. I said this in the chat before I ask your question, Guri. Folks, if you want to jump into the TLDraw and like try the sort of collaborative brainstorming activity there's 3 sections: what's good about a spatial canvas, what's not so good, and then just general ideas. So just sort of a catch-all category. Feel free to jump into the TLDraw and like take over any one of those spaces. And then also feel free to add stuff, like add other shapes, resize things, move stuff around. This is now your space. It's not my board anymore. And so I give you permission to make your own meaning in it. And I may talk about some of those points as we go and continue to ask questions as we continue to like talk out loud. Guri, go ahead.
Yeah, I love the issue that you brought up. You know, it's the whole LogSeq vision is that the goal is to be able to do the whole production from the drawing to the actual publication, if you like, or the finished product, everything. And I think that's been my goal too. But there is a real approach is that instead of doing it in one system, if every component is interoperable and exchangeable, then you end up with this, and local first, that's the key. Then, you know, like with Fission doing the same as Pyrgos, the application should come to you, not you going somewhere where all these capabilities are packaged. So if LogSeq would go into that model, then and make things make the such that any other drawing app could work with, or any other app which is their own ideas of the components, then we could actually have that. But I think that's the key, that you can't, as you just said rightly, that it may be a low-powered editor, but if it serves my real purpose in sense making, and especially if it allows me to do multiplayer, especially if it allows me to do collaboration, then you know, it makes sense to you know, not to, you know, you use the chiribiri thing for not this. This is all about it. It's okay if it's low powered, because as long as it is really end to end. So that's I really like that idea. I think that's the way we should be going. Yeah, I agree. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Guri. James, you commented in this chat a little bit earlier. Apparently, James is working on something called Moot, which is a contextless whiteboard built with TLDraw within a context-driven dashboard. I'm not actually sure I understand that sentence, but the next sentence he said is that he's dealing with the generalist problems that I was describing earlier. James, do you want to unmute or share about that more in chat, or maybe you put something on the board that we could highlight?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I can let me just share my screen if that's possible. No,
Yeah.
I can't. I mean, can I put something? I'll put a screenshot on the whiteboard
No,
showing
no,
it.
you can do either one. I just unshared mine, which means you can share yours, or if you want to drop it on the whiteboard and I'll zoom in over there, either one.
Yeah, sure. I will share.
Go for it.
Yeah, so it resonated a lot with the points you were saying about the generalist problem, because basically our vision for the product we're building is to have all of your tools that you need to do collaboratively in one dashboard or one interface. And obviously part of that is that you have to kind of either build everything again, or you need to find a way of incorporating all of your existing tools. So, and I think this is becoming more possible because of people like Steve, who are actually making open source packages or infrastructure that makes this stuff a lot easier, whether through the open source model or by building a like an infrastructure company like Daily or any other, like Supabase even I think contributes to that a lot. But we're finding we're getting a lot of inbound from every type of customer, people who are researchers, universities, scale ups, startups, people who just want a personal space where they can put all their stuff. But the tool doesn't quite fit anybody's needs to the point where they feel like they want to keep coming back. And we're in like two camps. We're like figuring out how do we narrow down and focus on one use case, or we just keep building stuff until it does become a really amazing tool that everyone wants to use. Because the Swiss Army knife is still an amazing tool, but it's like for a specific type of person who needs a Swiss Army knife, right? So yeah, we've got like this, and just on the points around the whiteboard becoming very messy and not feeling like a persistent space. Our big part of what we're building with Mood is trying to create a versatile tool that has like no context, and that's like the TLDraw whiteboard, and kind of building on that, but then having that contained within a context space, which is based on how people work and workflows. Meaning that if you're a dev team, you can have a whiteboard in there for whiteboarding technically, but then also have your GitHub in there so you can like actually put the creative stuff into a more rigorous tool for that type of thing. But it just resonated a lot of what you guys were saying about how being a generalist is a very difficult thing in this space because you have to do a lot, which is kind of what we're working towards, but it's still like a work in progress.
That's great. Yeah, James, thanks for sharing what you got working on. That looks really nice, by the way. Like that just the
thank you very much.
I mean, just the quick glimpse. Yeah, I have a couple. This brings up two thoughts in mind. One is the idea of embedding other like full applications into a spatial canvas, I think is really interesting. With the main thing I think that's blocking us from that is iframes, basically, are underpowered. Because most of the things we do have like a web app view. And if iframes had like full support, you could embed full applications inside. In fact, the tool that I've used in the past is called Greenlight by Croquet. You can go look it up. It's not very ergonomic, but it has the ability to embed full iframes and full other applications. And I've spent a lot of time working in that tool. It's more of a research project, so that's probably why you've never heard of it. They have no intention to make a product out of it or anything like that. But it's very powerful to be able to say like the entire application is inside here. It starts to feel like a zoomable desktop, and you start to look at your own desktop in a weird way of like, why the heck can't I zoom my Mac OS desktop? Like, why can't I zoom out? Why am I restricted to this like fixed aspect ratio and fixed size? Once you've kind of experienced the alternative. The other thought, though, was around, I plug this all the time, but the CFIST has Linus Lee has a post called Build Tools Around Workflows, not workflows around tools. And the genesis, like the summary of that post, which is worth reading in full, and I reference it, I've been referencing it constantly for 2 years now, is that you should understand the workflow that people need or that you yourself need. And then put together a tool chain around that, as opposed to what we normally do, which we look at a set of features that a tool has, and then we're like comparing features of like, well, this one has this ability and this one has this ability. Features are not what you want. What you're trying to accomplish is a workflow. Features can support that workflow, but you should start with the workflow. And this has particular relevance for startups. I was actually meeting with Pol from Firma last week, and Pol's Firma is a really cool general purpose tool. Like I mean, they built a freaking programming language into a canvas. I mean, it is really, really fun to play with. But they're starting to get, and thanks for the link, Darlene. There's the link to that post I was just describing. They're starting to get to the point where they're talking to users about specific workflows, and that is where the money is. Like, that is where the real user value is. That is where you're going to be able to say, like, nope, our spatial canvas is not going to embed a fully featured PDF editor because we don't have any users who want that. You'll be able to narrow scope in and like actually build something that people want. So this is like the startup entrepreneur in me of like, no, don't try to build a general purpose tool. You will die. Like, you don't have enough engineers. Like, find something that people really want and then like work out from there. But that's my opinion. I'm sure other people have different approaches. So I'm going to jump into, I'm going to share my screen again. Feel free to like raise your hand or ask questions if you have any.
Yeah, I raised my hand. Can I just jump in quickly? Yeah,
sure.
I mean, that is really, you just described what Joss was talking about a decade ago, which is the long tail of software. So, is the idea that that is the work, it's the flows you want. And I failed to mention, and do check out Pyrgos, because that's exactly what Pyrgos does. Only give you encrypted private, privately shareable social network, but at the same time, you can actually embed real applications, and you have your own suite. You know, any app that plays this game of works with the local first approach, i.e., this is you working with the user's own private space. Then you can actually build these workflows. That's what Pyrgos was designed for, if you like. That you can have all these applications, just like the same thing with Fission can do that, is that since every application is working with the same file store, now as long as you figure out how these are actually communicating, which can be done, I mean, how the meaning can be transferred from one to the other, which is what we really after, then you can actually have these things. And that I really love what you just said about this. Yeah, I fully endorse what you just said. Thank you very much.
Yeah. No, thanks, Kiri. Some great comments in here around like what's good. Yes. It's fun thing, I can't overstate that. I've had so much fun working with spatial canvases. I think that's one of the reasons that I've spent so much time there. Feel free to like, star things or whatever. I have played with a lot of these things and have found myself more joyful at the end of the day when having used these, as opposed to sort of sitting within the linearity of text for the whole day. And so I'd love to find ways to bring these more into my workflow. For those of you who have been around me at all, you know that I have like a second camera in here that points at my whiteboard so that I can just stand up and write on the whiteboard and share what I'm doing on the whiteboard. So that spatial thing is like very much like Maggie was saying, spatial is very near and dear to my heart. And so like having an opportunity to break out of text for a little bit and like lay things out spatially, it feels like a release, and it's hard to describe unless you're one of the people like me that needs that and have experienced that. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in here. Visualizing connections is an interesting plus that you get from this. Let's talk about what's not so good. There's lots of stuff over here. Wow. Somebody says you can't resize stickies, and it looks like Steve has already responded. He's already on the fix for that. Let's see what else is in here that's worth calling out. Zoom. Smart layouts. Yes, smart layouts is one of the areas where I'm really curious for people to explore. Of like, just to restate this because I want somebody to do it, is the ability to take a canvas that's laid out and have another view on the same canvas, has the same elements on it, but the view is constrained by, or like auto laid out by the computer, and then be able to switch back to my view. Like I can like toggle between, or have everything get stacked up and I can redistribute the things, right? So think like a deck of cards. where you like spread a bunch of cards out on the table and then you like want to take them back up into a stack. That's currently you have to do that manually. That's silly. The computer should be able to take all those things and stack them for you. And then maybe even auto lay them out in some way. So I think there's some really interesting possibilities around smart layouts that people haven't really explored. Probably comes down to use case specific stuff. But Steve, I don't know. Have you done any experiments in this space around multiple views?
I think it sort of. I mean, we have done a little bit of experimentation around like packing and layout algorithms. But the thing is that like, you're not going to like the answer, but the fact that well, one of the benefits of the canvas is that because it has no hard structure and no semantic structure that is like codified, you can break the structure at any time, you know, like just adding little arrows or annotations next to these things, or adding stars, right? Like you're able to really make meaning in a very dynamic way because there's no structure to fight against. The downside of that is that there's no structure to fight against, there's no structure. And while I think it's possible to, for example, train a model to derive meaning and content from reading a board like this, and to train a model in expressing ideas in a board like this, so both reading and writing, I think it's going to be a while. Or I should say this another way. If you're interested in working on this, then please reach out, because I'm interested in having you work on this. One of the maybe it's on the board, maybe it's not, but like putting computers aside, putting kind of like doing this automatically aside, it's even hard for normal humans to like derive meaning from like the end state of a whiteboard. In part because a lot of that meaning happened along the way and it's not captured in the end state.
Right.
And we've thought a lot about this problem. This is also very common in like digital classrooms where you might have like a board and like a lecture, but like, you know, the teacher is going to be pointing towards things that got erased by the end of the thing, or you have to see the board in the same moment as that stuff happened, because a lot of like meaningful stuff is lost before you get to the end. So I think even if you did have the ability for a computer to sort of derive meaning from a board, it would have to see the whole history of it and be able to drive that meaning over time. So it's a really hard problem. But yeah, it continues to be a challenge both for humans and computers to sort of make meaning out of this and represent that.
Yeah, I think one of the size small thing that I would start with, Steve, is just the ability to like actually have several different manual views of the same board. Like, I just want to manually relay out this one without destroying the one that I already have. Like, and so it's almost like a branching universe, right? Of like, I can do this in Git with a code file. I can like, you know, go off on a branch, do some stuff. And it may not, I don't even need merge. I just need the ability to like look between different branches of a space. I don't know if that would be useful or not, but I definitely get what you're saying of, I think the way that some sociologists or like folks say is that the meaning actually exists between us. Like, we're making meaning right now, but the knowledge isn't in any one of our heads. The knowledge actually is in it's in these relationships between us. And when you remove us from the artifact, you've actually lost knowledge. And so you have to like bring the same people into the same space in order to have the same set of knowledge be there. And if any one person's missing, you're missing something fundamental about the knowledge of the group has been lost, which is really interesting. Well, we're right at 1:30 and I want to respect people's time. This has been really, really helpful. So I'm just going to go glance at the ideas page real quick and then like wrap us up, put a bow on all this. Yeah, some ideas around PDF. Yeah, PDF editing, certainly. Community templates is an interesting, actually, an interesting one to look at there is Fermat. They do a lot with a toolbox metaphor for this. But yeah, getting spatial tools into the hands of domain-specific experts. Yes, that is what I was talking about like really working with people around a workflow to make their workflow fantastic and customizing the tool for them. I'm hoping more people will try to explore that space. Okay. thank everyone for being here. Especially thank you to Jakob and Ramses for the demo of LogSeq and the integration of TLDraw and the exploration that y'all are doing. I think it's really valuable. Hope to have Obsidian come and talk about their tool at some point, and it would be really interesting to compare and contrast some of those design decisions. Steve is probably going to come and talk at some point. We'll have you around to
Love
talk
to.
more about what you're learning in January or February. So we'll do another one of the spatial ones in January until we're the spatial canvas sessions will continue until all the problems are solved. I'm just kidding. Yeah. Thank you all for being here. Check out the recordings from the past sessions. This recording will be posted within a week or so. And everyone, enjoy your day.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for organizing.
Thank you.
You're
Thanks so much.
welcome.